You remember Green Day? Green Day was this band from like 20 years ago, and they were punk. They were mainstream punk. They're kind of like lame normie punk. And anyway, the Green Day singer, Billie Joe something, he was just at a concert and he held up a mask representing Donald Trump's severed head. He's doing Kathy Griffin like 7 years late. That's how lame punk has gotten. Punk has gone from, punk, like cool man, yeah, down with the system, to doing impressions of redhead comedians, 7 years later or something. But the reason this is offensive, or would be offensive if it weren't so lame, is President Trump almost had his head blown off a couple of weeks ago. And for a while, the liberals were pretending that they were really upset about this and that they abhor political violence. But now they're back at their old tricks. Joe Walsh, who is he's a Republican who only ever supports Democrats. He's one of those, Joe Walsh, I think, is representative of the liberals here. Walsh tweets out just a few days ago. He says, "I'm just not a fan of Harris calling Trump weird. Weird isn't serious enough. Weird is inadequate to describe the danger Trump is. Trump is a lawless, un-American psychopath. He's an existential threat to democracy. Calling him weird just doesn't cut it. Existential threat. That's the sort of language that justifies assassination." But when Trump was very nearly assassinated, Walsh tweeted out, "I pray that Donald Trump is okay and was not seriously hurt." Kind of weird to pray that an existential threat to your country is not seriously hurt, to pray that Hitler is okay. And he also said, "We consider the people we disagree with to be our mortal enemies. We can't continue down this road." Well, I don't know, to call him an existential threat seems to be continuing down this road. To hold up an image of a man's severed head would seem to be continuing down this road. To say that Donald Trump supports Nazis and admires Hitler seems to be continuing down this road. It's not just Joe Walsh. Here I'm referring to the Green Day guy, Kathy Griffin. I'm referring to Joe Biden. I'm referring to all of them. This is what they're doing. Okay. Green Day is doing this in part because it's been a long time since 2004, the last time they made a notable album, and they need some attention. But the libs broadly are without remorse. And they're without remorse for something that was very wicked, which is establishing the justification to assassinate Trump. And they're remorseless about this, in part because they really believe it. Or if they don't believe it, they don't care if he dies. And some of them have more overtly than others called for his assassination. But also because that's their whole campaign. They ain't running on Kamala. They're working overtime now to hide everything Kamala's ever done or said. So they ain't running on her. They're running against Trump. And the only way to run against Trump is to say he's an existential threat to democracy, that he's the worst thing in the world. So they got to run by continuing to buttress the justification to assassinate him. J.D. Vance has been pilloried. They can't find anything on J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is too impressive. He's too smart. He's too normal. His family's too beautiful. He's too reasonable on matters of public policy. He's too appealing in his political outlook to a large swath of voters. So they say he's weird, and they find this one joke he made on Tucker Carlson's show where he said, we're being run by childless cat ladies, our whole country. And they're hammering this joke, this flippant little line. And now reporters are grilling J.D. Vance's Senate colleague, Josh Hawley, about this. Here's Hawley's answer.
Back to J.D. Vance for a second.
Okay, yes.
Are you worried that his comments, like childless cat lady, could alienate the women voters that you need?
Listen, I just say this. As Republicans, we started by talking about the child tax credit. As Republicans, we should be in favor of helping people who want to have families have families. One of the reasons it's hard to have a family in America today is it's really expensive. I mean, parents have to work 2 jobs to have the kind of purchasing power that 50 years ago you could get on one income. That is not a positive thing. That is not a recommendation of our economy. So that's what we ought to be talking about.
I mean, some people don't want to have kids.
Yeah,
and
fair
I guess
enough.
Should Republicans be talking about women who don't want children in the way that J.D. Vance did?
No.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. The reason Hawley is running from this, again, could we say like J.D. was making a joke on a provocative show, and he's obviously not talking about every individual who matches that description. He's obviously not talking about people who've suffered from infertility or he's talking about a type. He's talking about a stereotype, a caricature. Barack Obama talks about the bitter clingers who cling to their guns and religion. Is he talking about every Christian? No, he's talking about a stereotype, and a very offensive stereotype. But in this case, that JD's making a joke. But why is Hawley running from this? There's something instructive here. In politics, you have to give people the ability to support you. You have to give people an off-ramp. This is a point I've made many times. Sometimes I'm criticized in my interviews or my interactions with leftists or others with whom I disagree for being a little too nice or something. I don't know. I think I hold my ground pretty strongly, and but I try to catch them where they are. I try to persuade them. I try to pull them over to my side. I want to give them, if I go on the Whatever podcast and I'm talking to women who are actively producing on OnlyFans, I'm going to have to talk to them a little bit differently than if I'm addressing the Christian Broadcasters Association conference or something like that. And I think that's fine. That's politics. You get to the universal through the particular. And so here, there are a lot of women, not just couples who suffer from infertility, but there are a lot of women who were lied to by colleges and by their teachers and by the media and by Hollywood and by everything. And they were told, don't get married. Oh, kids are terrible. Kids are like a sexually transmitted disease. You don't want them. If you accidentally get pregnant, you should abort the kid. Leads to all sorts of trauma for women. You should now just pursue your career. And then these women, I know a lot of women who've dealt with this problem. They wake up one day in their late 30s or their 40s and they say, shoot, man, I was lied to. I actually do want kids. I actually do want to get married. And then, you do the best you can. That's what J.D. Vance, I am certain, is not talking about that. J.D. Vance is talking about this stereotype and this ideal that the left has, that it's great to be the childless cat lady of this type of someone who actually hates family, who hates the opposite sex, who views the sexes not as complementary, but as totally opposed to each other, who hates the idea of children, like that woman Molly Jong-Fast, who said natalism, the idea of having kids, is authoritarian and fascist and right-wing. That's obviously what he's talking about. And so, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with Republicans making jokes and stuff like that. But Hawley's point here is, I think, instructive, which is when you're campaigning, you gotta give people an excuse to support you. You gotta give them that off-ramp. 30% of Gen Z says it's LGBTQ, LMNOP. You got to give them an off-ramp. You got to figure out some way. You say, hey, yeah, whatever, you're doing weird like gender and sex stuff and whatever. Hey, it's all right. Forget it. That's the past. Forget about it. Move on. And don't pillory them. You don't need to necessarily mock them. You say, look, there's a bad ideology. It should be from public life entirely. It's really messed you guys up, especially. Okay, move on. Don't worry. You're welcome here. We're gonna fix it. It's okay. No big deal. Let's move on. That's the art of inclusion. That was a great clip, and we all know it. So that's why you got to subscribe to the Michael Knowles YouTube channel, and you do that by ringing the bell right now. Come on. I'll wait. Come on. Great. Thanks.